Hi, this is Zibby Owens, and you're listening to Totally Booked with Zibby, formerly Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. In my daily show, I interview today's latest best-selling, buzziest, or underrated authors and story creators whose work I think is worth your time. As a bookstore owner, publisher, author, and obviously podcaster, I get a comprehensive look at everything that's coming out and spend my time curating the best books so you don't have to. Stay in the know, get insider insights, and connect with guests like I do every single day. For more information, go to zibbymedia.com and follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens. Rebecca Stead is the author of The Experiment. She is a New York Times bestselling author, also of When You Reach Me, Liar and Spy, First Light, Goodbye Stranger, Bob, and most recently, The List of Things That Will Not Change. Her books have been awarded the Newbery Medal, the Boston Globe/Horn Book Award for Fiction, and the Guardian Children's Fiction Prize. Rebecca lives in New York City, where she is always on the lookout for her next story idea. Welcome, Rebecca. Thank you so much for coming on Totally Booked to talk about all of your work, including The Experiment and When You Leave Me and whatever else we talk about. I don't know. We'll see.
It is so great to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, thank you. As I told you before, this is required reading from my kids' school, and I have 4 kids, so we've had a lot of people go through the books and everything. So this is particularly meaningful to me to talk to you. Tell listeners a little bit about you as an author, how you got started, your whole writing career, middle grade. Just give us a rundown.
Yeah, I'll give you the story. I grew up in New York City. I actually went to law school after college, and I was a lawyer for a while. I was a public defender for the most part. I worked in a few different offices, including a terrific one in the Bronx. And after my second son was born, so I have 2 sons, and my younger one, who is now 24, was born. I decided to leave the office in the Bronx where I was working and maybe get, I don't know, like a different kind of nonprofit law job. However, that whole time I had kind of had this back burner writing going on. I was going to workshops. I took a workshop at the 92nd Street Y. I was doing a lot of reading. I wouldn't say I wrote a lot, but I definitely felt longing to be writing. And I didn't think very much about publication, to be honest. It was mostly kind of an urge that grew out of my reading and loving reading my whole life. So I actually never went back to being a lawyer. 9/11 happened right in there in those first few months after my younger son was born. And so that, if you we all remember, that sort of felt like all the cards got thrown in the air and lots of questions and thinking about life. And I started writing my first book for kids right then. And so I was older. I mean, I was, this was my first attempt to sort of sit down and write on most days. I was in my mid-30s. And at one point, when I had kind of a messy draft of my first book, I wrote to a woman named Wendy Lamb, who I met in one of those workshops that I took. We took a workshop at the 92nd Street Y together. And she helped me. She was working in the children's book business at Random House, and she read it for me. She introduced me to other people writing, and it was really wonderful. I didn't know anybody else who was writing, and she introduced me to another writer. Then I found an online community that led to a critique group, and it was just step by step. And yeah, so my first book was published 6 years after I left that job in the Bronx. So it was a 6-year gap, 6 zeros on my Social Security statement. Might be more than 6, actually, probably more like 7 or 8. But I'm not a fast writer, so there's always 2 or 3 years between books. But I have been publishing steadily since that first one, which is great and really lucky.
That's amazing. I love that story. See, it all goes to show, you go, you do the work, you sign up for the classes, you're nice to people, you say yes to meeting people, and then things happen.
Yes, you have to be brave. And I am not famously brave, but when I found this critique group through this online group, I actually flew to Vermont to spend a weekend with someone that I had never met. I had read her manuscript and she had read mine, and there were a couple of other people. I think there were four of us that first time. And I actually thought, I had tiny kids, of course, at that point. And I just thought, are you really doing this? You're leaving, leaving New York of all, my goodness, taking a plane to stay with a woman at her house and you've never met her. And I guess at that point, my longing to, make that first book work sort of overpowered all of my fears, which was a really good thing.
And so now I've read two books of yours, not all of them, of course, but how is it that you are able to capture the middle grade experience so well, and all those hopes and fears and the friendship dynamics, and even when it's not based in reality, even when, the worlds are different, but the emotions are the same? Like, tell me a little bit about that, or if it just comes naturally to you.
I think that a lot of it for me is just about not trying too hard. I think that if you have it in the front of your mind, like, okay, this is a book for children, and I have to remember I'm talking to children here, it generally does not lead to great places in terms of writing and story. I think that it's a real mistake to think about readership too much when you're writing. So mostly I'm writing these books for myself. I was a huge reader as a kid. I loved all kinds of books. And that's where the love started. I did not love writing as a kid. I was not one of those kids who was like always writing and had stories and had notebooks and wanted to raise her hand and share. No, not even a little bit. But books were huge. And I think that when I'm writing at my best, it's because I'm not really worried about who my readers are. I'm more focused on the characters in the story. And my characters are children. So I'm trying to channel what I remember about like the territory of childhood. But I'm mostly trying to get rid of any artifice. I mean, obviously the stories can get pretty wacky. Particularly this new one, but that all comes from like a real love of the material, a real love for big twists and science fiction and, thinking about what might be. Those kinds of questions are definitely just like a part of me and my material. I think we all just have like a big circle inside us, and there are many things in that circle that we could write about. And so I think it's a good idea to stay in your circle.
Okay, so what are the things, for people who don't know you as well, what do you think are the things in your circle?
Oh gosh,
you set yourself up for that question. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I guess so. I walked right into that.
Yeah.
I almost always am writing about families. Often they're not completely sort of the most typical family. I grew up in New York with divorced parents. My parents separated before my memory started.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always had two homes, and I had stepbrothers and I have a half brother, but I would say that I have the psychology of an only child with divorced parents, and terrific parents. But it was certain kind of, view of the world, I think. And I think that I think I was always observing families as a kid. Like, how does this family work? How does that family work? This is interesting. When I'm with my mom, these are the rules. When I'm with my dad, these are the rules. It's sort of like there was a depth to my thinking about family. And I definitely write a lot about family, including non-traditional families. I'm obsessed with, I've learned from reading my own books, with sort of what I would call acting in concert. When people come together to do things, I find it very moving. So I often, get teary. So I get teary at the end of a play when the cast comes out, even if the play is not particularly moving.
Mm.
The way that when the cast comes forward and they bow together, tears spring to my eyes. And there's something about that feeling of that connection, that community, that has always been really big and central for me. And so I think that my stories often have these moments of connection where people are acting together. A lot of the time, it's like a big group, weirdly. And so those are definitely, and then lots of relationship stuff. And my parents are almost always real people in my stories. I'm not one of those people who's just like getting the parents out of the way. I think that when you're 10, 11, 12, 9, 8, these are my readers most of the time. Parents are a huge part of your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is one of your central relationships. And it may not be what you're worried about. Hopefully that's a relationship you can take for granted. But there's no doubt that those relationships are still central at that age. And so I do have parents who are real human beings in my stories. And then I love science fiction. I love speculative fiction. I love big story turns that feel not like a betrayal of the reader, where it's like it's a surprise, but also it's not sort of such a turn in the story that you feel like you've been pushed out of the story.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to say that exactly, but things that are surprising, but in a way that hopefully feels organic to the story. So that's one of the things I work on a lot when I'm revising.
So interesting. I'll never watch the end of a play from now on without thinking of you in this conversation. I have the same feeling when sports events, like when there's a big goal and everybody rushes the field and they're all hugging. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Totally. I love watching. I love watching athletes hug and celebrate and run at each other and jump into each other's arms, all that.
I know.
It's just like one of my favorite things ever.
When else do people do that? They don't.
Yeah,
When
exactly.
Take 20 men, do a dog pile. Like it's not happening on 73rd.
Yes.
Anyway, funny. So you do a lot of talking to schools. I know you went to my kids' school and everything. What has surprised you, or what's something funny that's happened, or what like keeps you going when you do school visit after school visit? Like what do you hear from the kids that is exciting? All of that.
I think for me, the best part of a school visit is where we're talking sort of writer to writer. That's what I love the most. If kids are willing to go there and talk about their own challenges or fears, and it doesn't have to be about writing, it can be about anything where you're kind of putting yourself out there. But I really like hearing kids' questions about their own creativity, their own sort of worries, or like when to share your work, who to share your work with, how to receive feedback. Like these are things that, writers, who are working writers, I don't think they ever really solve these questions because these are hard questions, and every book is its own journey. But I think what I really love doing with young people is talking about the fact that their experience writing is shockingly like mine. It's not like other things where the experience, a kid's experience doing it is wildly different from an adult's experience doing something. This is like there's a way in which you don't ever grow up as a writer. I mean, you get better at believing that it's going to work if you keep going. I think that once you've done that a few times, you can kind of keep the faith. Like even when it feels horrible, or hopefully, now I have writer friends, which is the best. They can say to me, you always reach this point where you want to throw your book away. Just keep going, And so if you can't say that to yourself, hopefully you have a friend who can say it to you. But yeah, the best part of being with young people is just sharing that experience and just being really honest about the struggle. because, nothing annoys me more than when people say they're just having a ball writing.
Yeah.
It's super frustrating and lonely, and there are great moments, and it is the thing closest to my heart for sure. I have never doubted that, but it's not always fun. And so that's something I like to talk about with kids.
I love that.
Yeah, I don't have like a crazy story. I mean, kids are funny and they will say like, can I have the name of your agent and stuff like that. But I mean, who am I? I'm like, I never say never. You don't know who you're speaking to.
That's
You could
true.
easily be talking to someone who's going to publish at 15. I don't know. So
Yeah. I mean, they've got to come. They've got to come
share.
from somewhere.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So if there is a grandparent or an uncle or somebody listening who has a middle grade kid and is like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know about Rebecca Stead somehow. Now I have to start my kid on her books. Where should they start? Like, what's the best entree into your work, or what are the top 3 you would want to give them?
It depends a lot on the reader and the kind of story they like, whether this story is being read to a young person or whether this is someone who's going to read on his or her own. I think that When You Reach Me is by far my most popular book. In a way, it's sort of the most me in that I sort of put my childhood time and place in there and sort of used my own childhood, the material kind of, and all of the little observations that you make about your world when you're a kid. That's the other thing I share with kids is like a lot of what I use in my work is information that they already have in their heads, like that I already carried by their age. And so just to remember the value of that, and nobody else has your collection of stuff. But so When You Reach Me, I think in many ways, I don't know, maybe just because more people have read it, it feels like my most typical book. But Bob is a book that is great for slightly younger readers. I think that's a book that I co-wrote with Wendy Mass, who has written many, many books, including the 11 Birthday series and Candy Makers. And what else? Goodbye Stranger is I would say, most mature story. It is sort of an older middle grade story. It's about kids who are going through more complicated stuff, and it's definitely the most mature. So I would say Bob is the youngest. Goodbye Stranger is probably the most mature. And everything in the middle, I don't know. I kind of have to know. I find this so hard to answer.
That's okay. That was a pretty good answer. That was good.
Okay, good.
When I reached out to you before and said it was required reading for my kids, you said you had mixed feelings about that. Tell me more about that.
I do. Yeah. I hate the idea of a kid like suffering through one of my books. Like I feel like if this story, no matter who wrote it, including me, is not working for you, I always want a kid to be able to put a book down and to find one that is gonna be for them. And so I'm always encouraging adults in my life, to let kids just read as they will, including lots of rereading, which I think is a key, wonderful experience as a reader. I've had, parents saying to me, my kid just wants to reread. And I always say, let them. I mean, that means that they are finding love and safety and happiness in a book. Like, let them go there as often as they want. It doesn't matter, including graphic work, including silly work, including comic books. I was a huge comic book reader as a kid. And it definitely, fed me in ways that I probably don't really understand, but I was so hungry for those stories. I loved them.
Hence the Calvin and Hobbes references.
Oh my gosh. Hobbes is genius. I'm in awe. And yeah, I mean, that's a good example of just how sophisticated really a comic can be. That's a deep friendship. And also just the love in that. The love between Calvin and Hobbes is something that I loved just holding in my heart while I was writing the friendship between the two boys in the experiment, because I love writing friendships, and I love whatever the genders. It doesn't really matter, but in this book, it's a friendship between two boys, which is strong and pure, and that is something that definitely kept me going through this one.
Amazing.
Did your son, how is it going with the book? Which book is he reading?
He already finished When You Reach Me at the beginning of the summer.
Wow.
My daughter read it last year, and yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's going well.
I hope it wasn't. I hope there was, that it was a pleasure at least some of the time.
Yeah. I think I think what you're saying, like the fact that it was required, like I think he would have read it anyway.
Yeah.
He's a big reader. So
right.
Anyway.
Oh, good. Well, that's great.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear what else he's reading.
Yeah. He's in a Stuart Gibbs phase as well.
Oh, yeah. Fantastic. Stuart Gibbs. I'm reading this right now, which I saw on your most anticipated list. Can you read this?
Oh, yes. The 9 Moons of Hanyu and Luli.
The 9 Moons of Hanyu and Luli. This is so, I am like complete. Like every time I have 5 minutes, I'm grabbing it up to read it.
Oh my gosh.
I was so excited to see that one on your list. Serena is also a friend of mine.
Oh, great. Amazing.
Yeah, we're going to a WNBA game tonight.
Oh my gosh. Well, have fun. Look at you. Well, Rebecca, thank you so much. Thank you for chatting with me, for all the time you spend with all the kids and all the encouragement you give them. And who knows, your talks have probably produced many writers already. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And thanks for everything you are doing to, showcase all of the books in the world. And there are many, many, and many deserving ones, but I feel very lucky to be here and to be on your fall list. So thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Okay. All right. Take care. Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to Totally Booked with Zibby, formerly Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. If you loved the show, tell a friend, leave a review, follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens, and spread the word. Thanks so much. Oh, and buy the books.